let's be very clear. You cannot involuntarily take people from the city and send them all over the state of New York. Putting someone in a hotel on a dark, lonely road in upstate New York and telling them they're supposed to survive is not compassion.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America, welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. Well, it looks like there's trouble in paradise between the People's Republic of New York City, led by Mayor Eric Adams, and New York State, led by Governor Kathy Hochul, concerning the handling of the migrant crisis. But before we get to all that news, please smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the video with your friends, and please subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of big plans for this channel. We're going to be doing some live shows. We're going to be doing a whole lot of other things. Maybe some guests come on the show. But we want to do it with a big audience. We want you guys to be involved. And we see that you're out there because you're watching the videos, but a lot of you are not subscribed. So please, 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 I can't beg you enough, subscribe to the channel. I hope today is the day that I earn your subscription with this discussion of the problems brewing between people who should be getting along. Let's take a look at the video that outlines the issues between Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams.
Harsh criticism today for Mayor Adams' handling of the migrant crisis from the Hochul administration.
It comes as the state is in the hot seat over the right to shelter and demands from both the city and advocates that Team Hochul do a lot more to help. CBS 2's political reporter Marcia Kramer is here now with the latest on this.
So before we get to Marcia Kramer's story, a little explanation, because the right to shelter is a unique thing to the People's Republic of New York City. There's a dissent decree, which basically means that parties came to an agreement that was then memorialized into a court order. In the case of Callahan versus Carey, it's a case that was started back in the late 70s. The contents of the dissent decree sets up what the city agreed to being a right to shelter to homeless men, women, and families who apply for shelter and board, provided they meet some qualifications. If they're looking for permanent shelter and board, they must qualify under an outlined need standard that was set up by New York State. Or if they're looking for temporary shelter, the applicant in need of temporary shelter would have to show there's a reason for it, such as a mental, physical, or social dysfunction. Now, the courts have interpreted this right to shelter very broadly. So when you talk about need standards from the state, there really isn't any regard given to financial need. And also, there's no regard to the conduct of the individual who's applying for it, which, if you connect the dots now, people who come to this country illegally can apply for this right to shelter in the People's Republic of New York City, regardless of their immigration status, regardless of their conduct of breaking federal law in coming to the country illegally. So that's the background of the city's request for additional aid to fulfill this right to shelter. And this is going to be discussing the state's response to the city's request. And as Marcia Kramer is about to talk about here, it's pretty scathing.
Well, Christine and Dick, it's an unusual battle between the mayor and the governor. Officials who have tried to make it seem that everything is hunky-dory between them. But the court battle makes it clear that they are not on the same page, not by a long shot. For example, the mayor wants the governor to get other localities to accept asylum seekers, but she is apparently not on board with that.
This brings up an interesting point, because New York City has been sending migrants to other counties, oftentimes without them knowing about it. And there's about 30 different counties within the People's Republic of New York State that are turning away New York City's efforts to spread the love of sanctuary for these migrants. Let's take a look at some of the counties that are dealing with that. So City and State New York took the time to go through all the counties in New York State that are saying to New York City, we're not taking any of your asylum seekers, we're not taking any migrants here. More than 30 counties here. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. So we have Erie County upstate, where the Democrat there announced that he will refuse additional asylum seeker arrivals after a migrant was arrested and charged for allegedly sexually assaulting an employee at a motel. Rockland County declared a state of emergency and issued an executive order that blocked hotels in the county from being used as shelters for asylum seekers. Another Democrat in Broome County declared a preemptive state of emergency to keep asylum seekers from being sent to upstate New York and Broome County. That's up in the Binghamton area. Preemptive action. They didn't even want to get a conversation with Eric Adams. They just said, we're locking our doors. On Long Island in Nassau County, the executive there, Bruce Blakeman, said, quote, "It is not the responsibility of local government, it is the responsibility of the federal government to have a national policy." So they're putting the blame right back where it belongs on the federal government. And where I live in Suffolk County, the Democrat county executive, Steve Bellone, issued an emergency order that required hotels and other lodging places to coordinate with the county before entering into any contracts with any other municipality to house any migrants or asylum seekers. So Eric Adams can't even contract with county facilities that are private businesses because there's an executive order, at least where I live in Suffolk County, saying that you got to talk to the county before you do that. Now that we know what the counties are doing in response to New York City's moves, the governor has to respond to New York City and stick up for these counties. Let's see what she has to say.
Let's be very clear. You cannot involuntarily take people from the city and send them all over the state of New York. Putting someone in a hotel on a dark, lonely road in upstate New York and telling them they're supposed to survive is not compassion.
Governor Kathy Hochul, in a phone interview on New York One, as her lawyers slammed the mayor's management of the asylum seeker crisis. It's part of a court suit over the right to shelter, with the city demanding the state do more, including picking up 2/3 of the expenses connecting with caring for the new arrivals and absorbing education and shelter-related costs for migrants sent upstate, costs the city has been shouldering. The governor also argued that New York City, which is at the breaking point with 101,200 asylum seekers here, is the best place for them.
The city has more opportunities for them to work, has more opportunities with public transportation. It has more English as a second language programs than they do in these rural counties.
The letter sent to the judge by Hochul lawyer Faith Gay slammed Mayor Adams for being slow to act, being slow to submit receipts for state reimbursements, failing to use a $25 million state resettlement program for 1,250 households, allowing hundreds of migrants to sleep on the street outside the Roosevelt Hotel when beds were available elsewhere, and ignoring state offers for shelter sites that could hold up to 3,000 people.
It is true that they did not accept some of the help we offered.
The state offered the city places like Aqueduct Racetrack, the Manhattan and Brooklyn cruise terminals, Pier 7 in Brooklyn, and gyms at Robert Clemente State Park in the Bronx and Riverbank State Park in Manhattan. At its weekly update on the asylum seeker crisis, the city argued that some of the sites the state offered were not feasible.
Sometimes it's the economic impact. Sometimes it's the impact to the community. There's a number of sites that have significant community impacts. There are sites that have environmental factors like flooding.
I asked Deputy Mayor Fabian Levy if he thought the criticisms in the state letter were fair.
We've been very clear we cannot handle this crisis solely on our own. There's a couple things that we would love the state to help take a lead on.
Now, ironically, the deputy mayor says he wants the state to take a more active role in stopping localities from issuing orders to prevent asylum seekers from coming to their counties. The next court hearing is next week. Christina Dick.
It's like ping pong, back and forth, back and forth. All right, Marcia, thank you.
Thanks, Marcia.
It is exactly like ping pong back and forth. Nobody wants to take responsibility for the laws and the precedent that New York City and New York State has established here. Everyone's passing the buck. But this 12-page letter is very interesting. Let's take a deeper dive into it. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. So here's a copy of the letter that the state sent to the city in response to their plan proposal for how to handle the migrant crisis. So this was in response to what the state says is a serious crisis due to the arrival in the city of over 100,000 migrants who need shelter, sustenance, and services. Nice use of alliteration there. I want to highlight just the parts that are more contentious than others that was brought up in the CBS report. So the first section discusses how the governor declared a state disaster emergency in recognition of the migrant crisis. This happened back in May of this year. Now, in crafting this, the state had asked for some considerations from the city as to what they wanted in this order, but the city apparently didn't respond to it. Here, for example, on page 3 of the letter, the state would have considered the list of proposed regulatory waivers contained in the city proposal earlier this year had the city made this request in connection with the executive order. Now remember, the request was made in August. The executive order was done in May. So the city is saying you're basically SOL here. You're plumb out of luck, New York City, to get any more from this executive order. So these waivers that you were asking for, they can't be done. So in the section discussing how the state has already secured $1.5 billion in financial support for the city. Now, keep in mind, by the way, the city is saying it's going to take somewhere around $5 billion just this fiscal year alone to sufficiently fund what New York City is doing for these migrants. So 1.5 million isn't going to get you to the promised land. So obviously they say it's been extremely costly. Yeah, you think? The state has already advanced $250 million. Again, saying that like that's a lot of money in the context of a $5 billion bill. But the state says, quote, the city has been slow to submit its cost reimbursement documentation for these funds, for the $250 million that they're talking about, thus far submitting cost reimbursement documentation for just $138 million in expenditures. And the state is providing these funds despite public reporting that raises substantial questions about the operations and conduct of the city's primary contractor and about the city's decision to allow hundreds of migrants to sleep on the street outside the Roosevelt Hotel, despite there being hundreds of vacant beds in the city's shelter systems. Yikes! That's a pretty heavy indictment. Basically, the state is saying you're mismanaging this. You're not putting in timely requests for funds, yet you're complaining about funds, and you're not using resources that are available, and as a result, people are living on the street. This is pretty nuts. Now remember, they're supposed to be allies and working together. They're all wearing the same uniform. The federal government, Democrat. The state government, Democrat. The city government, Democrat. They're all on the same team. This is like rats leaving a sinking ship. The state goes on to say that it recognizes that the migrant crisis poses a tremendous operational challenge for the city. The state has been deploying personnel, emergency response assistance, and logistical support to the city from its inception. And they give a list of all the things that they've done. National Guard members, including some of my friends who are on active duty right now. And salute to you guys dealing with what's going on in the People's Republic of New York City. You're better people than I am. So the National Guard is there. There was a list of shelters that was provided. And this is what really got me. These last two at the bottom here. The state strongly encouraged the city in June 2002 to set up congregate centers consistent with strategies used in response to natural disasters. But the city took nearly a year to act upon the state's recommendation. That's interesting. So again, the state is smacking the city on the hand again, saying, we told you to do something and you're not doing it. That's what happens with funding, right? So whoever has the funds gets to sort of dictate terms and policies and place strings and conditions on those funds. That's what the state seems to be doing with the city, and they're really raking the city over the coals for this stuff. The state also strongly encouraged and continues to encourage New York City to establish an incident command center, which the city has not yet done so. But they're still going. The state continued to coordinate with counties and local officials to facilitate the temporary shelter of migrants outside of the city. Now, this is what was discussed by Kathy Hochul in that clip, and they put it in black and white for the city to read and read and read again. The state has no legal authority to extend the city's obligation to provide shelter under the Callahan versus Carey consent decree to other counties and localities that are not signatories to the decree. Many migrants are not willing to move outside of the city, and the state will not sanction a policy of involuntary relocating individuals or families within or beyond state borders. And they give an example of having 77 migrants bused to Rochester, and 30 of those refused to get off the bus and return to the city. This is just a mess. A lack of coordination from the city to date has impeded the state's ability to foster productive relationships and discussions, including with the counties and localities that have offered to help. In particular, the city chose to send migrants to counties and localities outside of the city with little or no notice to or coordination with the state or those counties and localities. That has created opposition and has led to litigation that might have been mitigated or avoided if the city had acted in concert with the state and with the counties and localities where it sent migrants. Moreover, the city's failure to inform the state of critical incidents that have occurred in shelters outside of the city has compounded these difficulties, which means that these migrants that are being sent away, they're not exactly behaving themselves. But here's the final FU from Kathy Hochul to Eric Adams. In some instances, the city has failed to accept the state's offers of assistance or recommendations for state facilities. The city has not made timely requests for regulatory changes, has not always promptly shared necessary information with the state, has not implemented programs in a timely manner, and has not consulted the state before taking certain actions. While Governor Hochul and her administration appreciate Mayor Adams' public acknowledgement of the state's significant role in the crisis response, the city can and should do more to act in a proactive and collaborative manner with the state. Yikes! That is scathing to put that in writing for everyone to see. What a mess here. The jurisdictional buffoonery going on between the federal government, the state government, and the city government is just a complete mess. It's like a bunch of friends who forgot their wallets and they're trying to get out from paying the check, and they're each sneaking away from the table. This sort of agenda gymnastics that we're seeing from the state and from the city and from the federal government is exactly what I talk about in my book, Schnooks, Crooks, Liars, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available right now on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores. It's an award-winning book, folks, and the ebook is only 99 cents right now on Amazon. Go pick it up now. Now, I'm sure that Kathy Hochul, if she wanted to, could issue a new executive order or amend her current executive order to allow some of the regulatory needs of the city and to also intercede on behalf of the city with other county executives, especially Democratic county executives, to lessen the burden of their fellow Democrats in the People's Republic of New York City. But she's not doing that because there's a dirty little secret about New York State. Outside of municipalities like the People's Republic of New York City and other larger cities, Albany and other places, there are a lot of Republicans in those areas. Now, I live in a county, Suffolk County, that has a Democrat executive, but virtually all my elected officials in my area are Republican. So it's not easy for the People's Republic of New York City to simply look to the outer counties, either upstate, in the southern tier, on Long Island, in the Mid-Hudson area, or even in the North Country, because they're not going to see a lot of cooperation. There really is a lot of resentment towards the People's Republic of New York City from a lot of counties in upstate New York. So Kathy Hochul has to do a balancing act between the legal obligations of the city of New York to fulfill this consent decree and those counties who aren't affected by the consent decree and can do what they want. But Kathy Hochul is also being a little bit selfish and self-centered here in that she is hammering Eric Adams and New York City for inaction and failure to coordinate with the state. This is a power play. This is Hochul asserting her dominance over Eric Adams and saying to the People's Republic of New York City, you don't run the state. You may think you do, but you don't. Now, obviously, we can all see Eric Adams' position here. He's looking at a $5 billion bill, and the federal government and the state government are both heading for the door, and he's going to get stuck at the table to have to put down the credit card to pay it all. But at the same time, you see Hochul's point as well that the rest of the state shouldn't suffer for New York City's choice to enter into this consent decree, its choice to be a sanctuary jurisdiction, and its choice to continue to accept these migrants because of those past choices. I get it. It stinks for everyone. But what really stinks, and I'm sure that Eric Adams hates the most, is that it's not the Republicans that are doing this to him. It's Joe Biden and it's Kathy Hochul, who you would think would be on his team. But when it comes to money and when it comes to power, there is no honor among buffoons. So that's going to do it for this video. Again, please tell us what you think. Comment below. Who do you think is the bad guy here? Is it Eric Adams? Is it Joe Biden? Is it Kathy Hochul? Are there no angels here whatsoever? Let us know in the comments, and please share the show with your friends, smash that thumbs up button, and subscribe to the channel so we can have lots more discussions like this about all the shenanigans and buffoonery that's going on this week in Dumbmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.